I want to know if you've ever heard this saying, maybe from the high intensity communities, where they had mentioned the final rep is actually like, meaning that that final rep where you're approaching where you're pretty much going to failure is actually, now again, tell me if you've heard this, the safest. You've heard this saying?
Yes.
So enlighten us a little bit with your input on that, because I find that an interesting.
That's a great point. It's funny you brought that up because I believe that when I was in the era or the phase of high intensity training, because Mensa talked about that. A lot of people did. And it makes sense, when you explain it on paper. But then when you go in the gym and you see it, it's a totally different thing. So the way it makes sense on paper is because, you're so fatigued, you can't lift the weight very fast. There's no explosive movement because, you're so weak and you're so warm. There's so much blood in the muscle. So, let's say you're doing a dumbbell curl, the last rep is going to move so slow because you're so fatigued that you can't apply a ton of force, momentum, things like that. But in practical application, what we see is as you do a set and you're reaching failure, the set becomes very painful. And a lot of times when you're in pain, when you're fatigued, your body naturally doesn't want to be in that state. So it will do anything it can to get that weight to move. So if you're doing an exercise approaching failure, most times you'll see people taking a set to failure. As you get closer to failure, the form and the technique will break down. That's one of the first things that happens. And that's also why I don't recommend going to failure on something like a squat or a deadlift that's very technical, because those last couple of reps, especially let's talk about a deadlift, try taking a set of deadlifts to failure. For most people, the last rep is going to be very, very ugly. Very ugly. And, if you're training, let's say, people do deadlifts for back, or they're doing it, let's say, for the posterior chain, it's just one part of your body that's actually failing. And if it's your lower back, now you're placing the entire burden on just the lower back. Same thing with a squat. The idea of taking a squat to failure, or at least the way in high intensity training, the goal is you want those quads to fail. That's why you're taking the set to failure. But if you're doing a squat, a lot of times that form is breaking down to the point where it's not even your quads that are failing. It's your lower back, your technique that can't hold the weight anymore. So you're putting your body at such a high risk for poor technique, and you're not even accomplishing the main goal, which in that set was, I want to take my quads to failure. So in reality, you're getting your quads maybe 1 or 2 reps shy of failure, but your lower back wasn't able to support that weight, or the technique broke down. So you're not even getting the benefit that you're supposed to get from the failure training, but you're also putting yourself at a higher risk. So, and I can tell you this, 90% of the aches and pains or the injuries I've had in the gym have actually come from the last rep. So that firsthand experience, whether you want to argue or not that the last rep is the safest, my experience has shown time and time again that the majority of my little niggles or injuries that I've gotten in the gym have come from that last rep, for sure. But again, it's usually on a rep that wasn't necessary. Whenever I've done that, it's literally where I said to myself, and I've said to myself before, you can put the weight down, you did enough. But then the ego sets in and you say, listen, I want to break a PR. I want to do another rep just to see if I could do it. And you wish you didn't do that last rep. That's usually when it happens. And there's a lot more that goes into it than just the fact that you're training to failure. A lot of times those injuries come from other aspects that people they're not even aware of, like the programming itself. A lot of times, if somebody gets an injury similar to that, let's say they go in the gym and they do a rep, and just that one rep, for whatever reason, something tore, a little snapped, or a little aches and pains. A lot of it was predetermined by what they did previously, the week before, prior weeks. If you're training in a system where, let's just say, you're training all out on one exercise without giving it proper rest over time, you might walk in the gym that day and you might think it was just the last rep that you did. Maybe the technique and the set was perfect, but just so much fatigue and so much overlap and lack of recovery built up that when you went in the gym that day, whatever you did, you're going to probably result in an injury. And I think that's where proper programming and recovery really, really is overlooked for most people. People just think, my chest is not sore today, so I'm recovered. But if for the last 6 weeks you had some type of improper programming or something that didn't lead to proper recovery over time, you can walk in feeling okay. The second you grab that heavy weight, your body is just like, no, I don't have another week of this. And that's where those injuries come out of nowhere. Yeah.
No, that's an incredible thing you brought up, and we can dive into that, because I don't want to, like you had mentioned, like scare people away from training hard or training to failure, because there's so many.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
Yeah,
I don't want to do that.
No, definitely
I'm glad you're mentioning that, because I just want to make that known too, because I'm the person that tells people all the time that they don't train hard enough. So I don't want to go down that. Yeah. Yeah.
But this is why it's so there's a balance between having the perspective on both ends of the spectrum, so that way you can be smart about it. Because I think either some people are on one end of the spectrum where they're not training at all hard, or they're training way too hard, and it's like, okay, that's why we're bringing this up, because there's a time, a place, and there's many variables to consider that could influence, like what you had just mentioned, where maybe you're at more risk for an injury, and programming is one of them. Recovery, sleep. Are you choosing the right exercises for your body? I wanted to bring these up because it's not just training all out effort that's a problem. It's training all out effort, maybe too much, too often, too frequently in a row, maybe, right? So it's, I think those are important things to just bring up. So if we were going to make that simplified for the listener, where you have these different versions, like you got like quote unquote your bro split where everything's getting hit once per week, versus on the other end of the spectrum, the full body 5 days per week, which is So have you found from your experience that maybe somewhere in the middle, potentially there's a sweet spot?